If you've ever tried to sell your short-term rental property, then you know just how difficult and nightmarish it can be if you don't have the right representation. Here's what we do to help our sellers, and even when we're selling our own properties as short-term rentals, to make sure that we're as optimized as we can be. The first thing is making sure that the property is made ready. Whenever you're running a short-term rental, I'm sure you know, if you're a short-term rental investor, that the property can get beat up and it can look like it's a short-term rental. And so it's important that you have someone go through prior to listing to do like a full make ready, touch up paint, make sure that the house smells good and all the furniture doesn't look ratchet. And sometimes we've found that if a property is staged as a short-term rental and it gets beat up, it can actually deter people from the property by having the wrong furnishings in there. So sometimes it's even nice to like add better furnishings in the property as you're doing that make ready process. The second is having a plan and cadence for showings. So when you're running a short-term rental, a lot of times weekends are booked. And the unfortunate part of that is that most of the time buyers for your property are gonna be looking on the weekends. So you have to figure out, how are we gonna go about showings? When are we gonna do open houses? Who's gonna communicate with who to make sure that we all know when the calendar is open and available for showings, and also when the property is ready. So what we do whenever we're working with sellers that are selling their short-term rental is we either like to get connected to their Airbnb account as a co-host, or we like to get connected to their property management system as like a user on their account, so we can have full access and visibility into the calendar, so we don't have to bug the seller to say, hey, is it ready? Check with the cleaners, check with these people to make sure that the property is actually ready and available for showing. Because if you're selling a short-term rental, it's also really important that people don't just randomly show up at your property when a guest is staying there. While it may not necessarily affect the sale of your property, sometimes if a random person shows up, and let's say an agent shows up and starts showing the property while a guest is there, if a guest complains to Airbnb, Airbnb may suspend your listing or even ban it if anything goes wrong enough. So you want to avoid that liability entirely. So having a plan for communication, visibility into the calendar to make sure that that all goes seamlessly is very important. Third would be being able to sell the vision. A lot of times, whenever you're selling a short-term rental property, the income may not make sense for a short-term rental buyer as is. And so it's important that you're working with somebody that knows how to sell the vision of what improvements can be made to increase the revenue to where the cash flow numbers make sense for an investor. And it's also important to talk with someone that has access to large numbers of buyers of short-term rentals. You don't necessarily have to have immediate access to thousands of short-term rental buyers offhand like we do, but there are different platforms that you can use that will actually send your property out as a short-term rental listing. And so it's important that you're working with someone that knows how to navigate those different nuances. Selling a short-term rental property can be very difficult and stressful if you're doing it wrong. So it's important that you have these things in the back of your mind whenever you're figuring out your plan for how you're gonna sell your short-term rental. Another tip is when you're selling a short-term rental is having all your financials completely organized for the entire time that you've been running it. Because every time a buyer that is a short-term rental investor is gonna wanna look at the property, they're gonna ask you for financials, and you wanna have that offhand. And I recommend too, if there's ever periods where you've been staying at the property or where it was down for maintenance, you wanna add that in there as well so that people understand if the numbers might look a little bit lower. I'll also add into our financials what like an actual professional revenue projection would be with X, Y, and Z improvements from a professional management company so that you can help sell the vision. Another question that we get whenever people are selling their short-term rental is, what do I do with the bookings? Can I keep the reviews that the seller has? Like, these are all normal questions. The first thing is with reviews. Airbnb does not allow you to transfer reviews from one listing to another. We've seen some instances where a seller is willing to give a buyer access to their account as part of the sell, but we typically highly recommend against that because there are some potential liability issues. Someone booked under someone else's name, but then something happens and there is a potential lawsuit for, let's say someone gets hurt at your property. Who's responsible for that? It was under someone else's name, but you're the owner now, so there's some confusion there. So we really highly recommend against keeping the current owner's account. But what you can do is on VRBO, you're able to transfer the reviews. Can't transfer the bookings. They have to rebook on both Airbnb and VRBO. And so what we'll do is we'll have the current owner message all of the guests after closing and give them the new link. So it's important as the buyer that that they have the listing set up pretty much immediately after closing. You send that to the seller gives that to the future guests, and Airbnb will actually let you cancel any bookings for free, penalty free, as long as you show them that you sold the property. Then they won't hold that against you. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It just helps get our message out to more people. And shameless plug, here at CRIBS, what we do is we help people buy, build out, manage, and operate their short-term rentals, especially if you're located in the Austin market, but really we can help people anywhere. If you're interested in more information on any of that, please just hit us up. Oh, and also watch these other videos. They're either up here or down here, or I don't know wherever they're at, but watch more videos.